Okay, the other assessment methods that was referred to in the previous video includes biological, geomorphic, and geochemical assessment methods. These can be used as techniques to identify the impact of a particular impairment. So you might use, for instance, a biological approach to be able to determine whether or not a certain concentration of a pollutant is causing biological impairment. Or you might be using the geomorphic method to determine what is the cause of high sediment loads in a stream channel. It might be because of channel instability or channel dynamics. And then geochemical method can be used as ways of evaluating what kind of chemistry is going on or processes that are going on in a stream or lake water body or wetland water body, and also to help to identify where polluted water is coming from. What is the source of particular polluted water? So we'll look at each of these other assessment methods. So biological assessments would help to look at the aquatic system and be able to quantify the health condition or health status of an aquatic system. Some typical methodologies include Fish Index of Biological Integrity, or IBI score. The second one would be macroinvertebrate IBI score. Both of these could be used to evaluate whether a particular pollutant is a possible cause for reduction in quality of the water for the aquatic life, and thereby indicating an impairment, that the impairment is caused by that pollutant. Habitat integrity, a methodology, for instance, including qualitative habitat evaluation index, is a methodology for looking at the condition of a stream and determining whether or not the habitat is suitable for the aquatic organisms that would normally live there. An example of this would be to look at the embedded sediment that might exist in the bottom of a stream channel, where normally there would be gravel, and for certain species of fish, gravel is important for a reproductive cycle and for food. And if there's too much fine material, it might embed in that gravel and lead to poor conditions for that particular species. The species I'm talking about probably be something very sensitive species like trout and salmon. Invasive species characterization, are there zebra mussels, different kinds of invasive plants like milfoil, curly pineweed, are those species present and thereby helping to cause impairment in the water quality. Then characterization of microbial pollution. You can go out and quantify the type of microbes that are, concentration of microbes that are in the stream. So you might be looking at fecal bacteria, and the question would be, are those fecal bacteria in the stream because of domesticated livestock, because of pets, because of humans, or is it because of wildlife such as beaver, deer, and so forth? And techniques are being developed now where the type of bacteria, based on the DNA of the bacteria, come up with a pretty good estimate of the source where the bacteria is coming from, whether it's from domesticated organisms or whether it's coming from wildlife. This is very important because sometimes you'll find very high bacterial levels in a stream. You'll think it's impaired because of land use. Turns out that the high concentration is due to native organisms, because of wildlife. And a good example of this would be geese, which can produce a lot of manure and a lot of droppings, and the droppings carry a lot of bacteria. For geomorphic assessments, you can use these to quantify the stability of a channel. Can quantify the channel evolutionary stage if it is in a transition stage. And of course, for either one of these, there would be more sediment being generated if the channel is unstable, or if it's in an evolutionary stage, there'd be more sediment being generated or being deposited, depending on what the stage is and what the condition is. And so one would be able to evaluate whether the sediment sources are coming from the channel or whether they're coming from upland areas. The technique called watershed assessment of river stability and sediment supply, which is called WARS, or labeled as being WARS, developed by wildland hydrology. David Rosgen's approach is a methodology that provides, or is a tool that provides techniques for doing these kind of assessments. Lastly, geochemical assessments would include the use of isotopes and other types of stable chemistry to identify sources of water that are occurring in stream flow. So, for example, if we want to know whether high chloride concentrations in water at a stream gauging station are coming from surface runoff, whether it's coming from groundwater flow, whether it's coming from drain tile flow or storm sewers, one can use stable isotopes to, in many cases, to separate out the flow at the gauging station into flow sources, and one would be able to determine as to where the chloride is coming from. And chloride is just used here as an example. You could also use it to look at bacteria, nitrate, phosphorus, other kinds of pollutants of interest to be able to identify that source. And if you then know what the source of the water is that's providing the pollutant or contributing the pollutant, you might have a better chance then of trying to mitigate the issue, because then you'd be able at least to identify the source and go in and put a BMP that would be suitable for treating that source. Less used would be noble gases for doing something similar to the stable isotopes. The difficulty here is that noble gases, the analysis of them is very expensive, whereas for stable isotopes you can probably do the analysis for about $10 or $14 a sample. With noble gases it can be up as large as $1,000 per sample. Also, looking at reactive and absorptive chemicals as tracers to identify flow pathways is another tool, in addition to stable isotopes and noble gases. And so, as an example, sulfur can be used to identify the presence of preferential flow processes in the soil. So again, it would be given ideas to what the source of the water is, but also the flow pathways. Is the water going to deep groundwater? Is it going through shallow soils? Is it because of soil structures, drain tiles, or other kinds of features in the soil that end up creating fast pathways for water to reach the outlet? chemicals like sulfur can be used or have been used and proven to be able to identify the presence of preferential flow pathways. And with that, the video is complete.